Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Exactly at noon on April Fool's Day in 1928, the carters of Calcutta unhitched their draft buffaloes to rest the animals in the cruel heat, just as the colonial legislature of Bengal had ordered. Left in the middle of the road in Bada Bazar, the carts blocked tram lines and traffic, cutting off the routes between the city's jute mills and the river jetties. As police fought to clear the roads, historian Tanika Sarkar records, the people hit back, launching fusillades of bricks, soda water bottles, iron bars, and sharp iron wheel discs from their carts. This was later acclaimed by the official communist press as the first barricade street fight with the police in India, an intelligence bureau report later recorded, adding, which indeed it was. 7 carters were shot dead by the police. Now, last week, police in Assam filed first information reports against the organizers of buffalo and red-vented bulbul fights. The government stopped short of using force to prevent gatherings, likely understanding the potential risks of taking on cheering crowds. In 2017, after all, mobs set light to police stations in Tamil Nadu as authorities sought to stamp out Jallikattu bullfights. Animal sacrifices at temples have persisted in several states despite laws prohibiting the practice, sometimes leading to criminal prosecutions. As you know, animal cruelty is a growing subject of debate in India. As a parent to 3 dogs, I have strong views on this. But I'm not sure the legislative push to increase punishments, now pending in Parliament, is a simple moral issue. Tens of thousands of cases involving gratuitous cruelty to animals, ranging from sexual assault to sadistic torture, are registered each year, independent studies show. Yet, the more than century-old story of policing how humans treat animals, which you'll see is a sometimes bizarre, sometimes tragic tale, shows that complex questions of class and culture are also involved. Through the colonial period, the ethical norms of urban industrial societies and traditional rural cultures raised uncomfortable questions about power asymmetries centered around class, caste, and faith. Those questions remain unresolved to this day. Florence Stanley had emerged as a kind of Florence Nightingale, if you like, of the animal kingdom in early 20th century Bengal, relentlessly campaigning against cruelty. She was among the very few women to have served in the Kolkata Metropolitan Police. Her deceased husband had been a brigadier in the colonial Indian Army. Leading the Calcutta Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, Stanley saw the campaign against the mistreatment of animals as part of a broader effort to hold up the moral order by eradicating sex work and commercialized vice in all its forms. Stanley won the support of moral crusaders for her campaign to give buffaloes a summer season rest break. But anyone looking at the street would have seen the irony. Police officer Douglas Gordon, who was also British, noted that, quote, others held that it was no more cruel than for any other beast, even humans, who had to work and sweat at heavy tasks in the heat. Everyone wasn't persuaded either that the Bengal legislature had acted in good faith. Gordon, who fought the Carters in 1928 when so many were shot, noted that European members of the legislature supported Stanley, and I quote, not so much on grounds of cruelty, but because such a measure might lead to the substitution of motor lorries for the antiquated and slow carts. For Stanley and her peers, historian Neil Ahuja records, the practice of something called fuka emerged as a critical concern. Forms of fuka, the inflation of the womb with the air, often through a bamboo pipe inserted in the milch animal's vagina, was widely supposed to improve the production of milk. This was a belief, true or otherwise I can't say, that was seen among peasant communities from Ireland to Ethiopia. Like the American missionary Catherine Mayo, who was the author of an infamous polemic against Indian self-rule, Stanley saw the treatment of, and I quote, children, women and animals as interlinked signs of the barbarity and inhumanity of Asiatic racial types. Looking into a cowshed, Stanley had looked as a milkman, and I quote from her journal, seized the animal by the hairy end of the tail and with the greatest possible violence, thrust this together with his hand and arms up to the shoulder inside the vagina of the animal. By the movements of the man's arms, she wrote, one could see that he was inserting the hairy end of the tail right inside the uterus. Then after, and I quote again, very casually dipping his hand in a tub of water, he started milking the buffalo. Now, this kind of pain-inflicting practice had repulsed many Indians too. Mahatma Gandhi came to be repulsed by all kinds of milk after learning of the existence of fuka. He writes about this in his autobiography, My Experiments with Truth. For colonial authorities, though, the war on fuka was also a rhetorical and ideological weapon, which legitimized efforts to regulate and control the practices of rural Indians. If what Indians did was barbaric, then it was justified for the state to step in and make them behave in different ways. Legislation introduced in 1899 specifically outlawing fuka did little to end the practice though. In 1948, the Calcutta High Court reduced a 3-month sentence handed to milkman Subol Kohli to a fine of 100 rupees, noting that the offence was comparatively mild. I quote from the court order, the cow was subsequently milked and continued to produce milk, indicating that the process of fuka committed on it had not been of a very serious character. The judges noted. The campaign did give momentum to various political groups, white rulers seeking moral legitimacy and native nationalists concerned with the protection of Gaumata. The poor peasant got moral sermons, but not empowerment. Founded in 1861, the Calcutta Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals had been fighting carters long before the 1928 strike. After the introduction of the first animal cruelty laws that year, posters were put up warning the drivers and owners of mistreated hack horses and draft buffaloes that they could face prosecution. The number of wounded animals the organization noted in an 1862 report far exceeded the number of healthy ones. Large numbers of police prosecutions followed, but the burden fell mainly on carters rather than the elites who owned the animals or the middlemen who loaded the carts excessively. Living in a society where malnutrition and disease claimed enormous numbers of lives, the carters were less than impressed by the language of animal rights. The law did not criminalize the passion of colonial administrators or native rulers for the wholesale slaughter of animals, or the practice of Bengal elites of keeping caged birds for their amusement. The carters responded by going on strike, which led to widespread losses for Bengal's colonial-era merchants and traders. Efforts were made down to lay mandatory weight restrictions for cartloads, but those had little on-ground effect. Historian Samiparna Samanta's excellent work on animal-oriented humanitarianism in colonial India shows that the conflict with the carters was part of a series of skirmishes around hygiene, butchery and slaughterhouses. The slaughterhouses, she notes, became the perfect colonial irony. On the one hand, throughout the 19th century, the demand for meat eating increases, and on the other, there is an increasing appeal for kindness and compassion towards those very animals which are going to be slaughtered. Echoes of these battles still play out today in the conflicts over the sacrifice of animals in temples and public venues on occasions like Shivratri and Eid. Few reading through recent newspaper headlines would fail to be repulsed by what we see. Killing puppies, our moral intuition shouts out, ought to merit more punishment than a fine of 50 rupees, which the law currently mandates, as should gang raping goats or forcing birds to fight each other to death. And yes, those are real things you can find if you just do a little Googling. The issue is too complex, though, to be left to moral intuition alone. Large numbers of cases of animal cruelty around the world, we know, involve psychiatric illnesses, and India's criminal justice system is ill-equipped to investigate and address that particular problem. And that isn't the only issue here. Even as vigilante killings to protect cows continue, the scholar Yamini Narayan shows in her path-breaking work, there is a sphere of permissible violence against animals. Less well-performing stud bulls, for example, are subjected to something called electroejaculation, the administration of electric shocks of up to 24 volts through the rectum. The painful practice of palpating the uteruses of cows before artificially inseminating them is commonplace. In other words, some kinds of cruelty is okay, but others isn't. The killing of an elephant with a firecracker-filled pineapple causes widespread outrage. But the killing of wild boar with the same kind of explosive device, or the setting up of electric fences to keep out wildlife even as we encroach on their habitat, is conducted with widespread social and political approval, researcher Vaidyanath Nishant wrote. Letting loose the criminal justice system to defend the rights of animals has already victimized the most vulnerable in our society for more than a century. The victims include Adivasi communities who are dependent on ever-diminishing forests, as well as the urban and rural poor who consume beef, and entire communities whose traditional practices have been deemed criminal by the moral values on which urban modern society and its laws rest. Treating animals humanely is a good thing, but at end needs more than tougher laws or aggressive policing. Like its colonial predecessor, modern India needs to take a long, hard look at what it imagines to be its civilizing mission. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor at ThePrint. Thank you for watching Security Code.